Welcome to the second devlog from my game Roguelike Dungeon Tycoon, a reverse roguelike where you build the dungeon. This devlog is going to be kind of a part 1, because I've been overhauling the game quite a bit over the last 2 months since the first devlog was released, but I don't think it's in a place yet where I can show off all the changes in detail. So this devlog will mostly be about the analytics I incorporated in the first build of the game and what I learned from those. At the end, I will show a little preview of some of the new gameplay, but it's definitely still a work in progress. The visuals in particular aren't super solid right now. But anyways, let's get into it with the stats and analytics. First stat I'm interested in is the total number of play sessions. This is kind of like the biceps of stats, as it's more of like a glamour stat and doesn't really serve a purpose. Quiver Analytics said I had 383 total play sessions. However, this is where we run into the first mistake I made with these analytics. I didn't filter out my own play sessions from when I'm developing and testing the game. Luckily, for this specific stat, I have a way to get an accurate count that excludes my own play sessions because itch also tracks plays. I never playtest my game on itch, so the more accurate number of plays is actually 113. So my metaphorical biceps just got cut into a third. For the rest of the stats, in an effort to remove my own plays as much as possible, I'm going to try to limit the time frame from January 15th, that's when the video was released, to around February 20th, which is just kind of an arbitrary date I picked that I'm pretty sure is before I started overhauling the game and playtesting a ton myself. This obviously isn't perfect because I did work on the game in between those dates, but as we'll find out, none of these analytics are perfect and that's not that big of a deal. I collected a lot of other stats, some told me very little information and others told me no information at all. So I'm just going to fire off some random stats that I found interesting. There were 91 instances of a player not finishing their dungeon floor. There were 135 instances of players trying to buy a card but not having enough money. There were 381 instances of players buying cards. I'm glad that latter number is bigger than the former because that means people generally understood the idea of buying cards, despite there being no feedback when you can't afford a card. The Ranger class was picked least with only 59 picks. Next, the Wizard class was picked 88 times. Then, with no surprise to anyone because it's obviously the best class, the Warrior was picked 170 times. I also want to point out here that the Warrior is right in the center of the screen when you're picking your character, so that might also lead to it being picked more often. The monster hit versus miss ratio was about 50-50, skewed slightly in the direction of missing more often, which is actually pretty perfect. The hero is landing hits about twice as often as they're missing, which is good, although in the new version of the game, the hero never misses, which is a little spoiler for later. The hero's crit ratio seemed pretty okay, although I didn't do the exact math. I'm not sure if I recorded the puzzle analytics correctly because there are way more passes than fails, and in my personal experience I was failing the puzzles constantly. I definitely didn't record the traps right, because there's only 73 instances of dodging the trap, and there's 756 instances of failing the trap. I did discover a bug recently that made it very rare to dodge the trap, but 756 seems like too many. That's it for the basic stats. Now I'm going to get into some more complex analysis and data extrapolation, which is really just a fancy way of me saying I'm going to make some shit up. Obviously the Warrior was the most picked class, but if we look at the hero's stats when they died, it seems a lot of heroes had agility higher than one. If we sort of mentally discount the small number of Rangers picked, my theory is that people picked the Warrior and then realized the traps were the most low-cost chamber to play, and ended up playing a lot of them, which in turn leveled up the Warrior's agility. So it's kind of cool that people sort of figured out a meta in the game, even if that meta is exploiting the terribly balanced systems. I also tracked which chamber the hero was in when they died, and most people died in the base chamber, the one with no challenge in it, so that must mean that they starved to death. The 3 chambers with challenges in them have deaths pretty equally divided among them, which is good, although I can't be sure if it's the chamber that killed them or if they starved to death in those 2. An unlucky few did die in the potion chambers, which also means they must have starved to death. This tells me that most of the deaths were from starving to death, which is consistent with the most common piece of feedback I got, which was to change the hunger meter in some way or another. To be honest, I don't understand why changing the name would make it any better, but everyone seems to agree that hunger doesn't make any sense. I don't know, it makes sense to me. Am I dumb? Yup! Regardless, I definitely think the hunger system, or whatever it ends up being called, needs a serious rework. Although I didn't need the analytics to tell me that. Something that's especially annoying is when you starve to death in the last chamber. Something cool I can do in Quiver is create funnels so that I see how many players activated one event and then another event. Here I have a funnel for how many players failed to buy a card and then left their dungeon unfinished. Since there's double the amount of failed to buy card events, I'm assuming that means players clicked the button multiple times. I don't really know what this tells me, but it's kind of neat to see. Another interesting funnel is one where the players pick a hero and then go on to die. These ratios are fairly similar across all the heroes, which I think means they're equally balanced, so that's good. In general, I don't think I went about these analytics the right way. For one, I didn't capture the events with enough detail or granularity to make sense of a lot of the data, and two, I don't think my approach of just putting analytic events everywhere in the game and hoping to get some useful information was a very good plan. Playtesting and balancing a game is kind of like painting a house. First you do the broad strokes of painting the walls with a big old rolly brush, then you get a smaller brush to do the details. I think playtesting and player feedback is like the rolly brush, and analytics are like the detail brush. The two biggest things I learned from the analytics were the hunger system sucks and the balance is weird. Coincidentally, I already knew all that stuff from the comments you guys left me. I think just sticking with player feedback for the broad strokes of balancing a game is all I need at this point. I think where analytics really come in clutch is when you need to test a hypothesis you have about how to fix your game. For example, players may feel like they're not getting enough gold, and so you implement some analytics to see how much gold they're getting. Then it turns out that they're getting a lot of gold, but the actual problem is that they have to spend all their gold on health potions so they don't have enough money for the things in the shop. Giving the player more gold may help, but you still have an economy problem. There's this quote by Bill Hader when he's talking about receiving feedback that I really like. When people tell you something is wrong, they're usually right. When they tell you how to fix it, they're usually wrong. I think analytics can kind of help you with the how to fix it part when playtesting just told you what is wrong. Okay, so that's it for the analytics stuff, and as promised, I'll end the video with a bit of gameplay from the current version of the game. Before I go though, I just wanted to say thank you so much for all the comments and feedback I received in the first video. I know I may have sounded a bit critical of all the anti-hunger system comments, but I really do appreciate any feedback or positive comment on the games or videos. I was kind of blown away with how much people seem to be interested in the game, and it has definitely motivated me to make it the best that I can. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe and all that. Anyways, here's the gameplay footage. See ya.